Hello my students, in this video we are going to focus on finding the imaginary solutions for the quadratic equations. Finding imaginary solutions. Some quadratic equations have solutions that are imaginary numbers. Some quadratic equations have solutions that are imaginary numbers. And in this video, we're going to focus on finding the imaginary solutions for these quadratic equations. Problem 6. What are the solutions of 2x squared plus 32 equals 0? 2x squared plus 32 equal to 0. Then how can we find the solution of this equation? How can we find the solution for this equation? We need to find x. We need to find x. And we have a quadratic equation. So we are going to isolate x squared. We are going to isolate x squared. So we will add negative 32 to each side. Add negative 32 to each side. Then we have 2x squared is equal to negative 32. 2x squared is equal to negative 32. Then how can we find x? Divide each side by the coefficient of x squared, which is 2. Then we have x squared is equal to negative 16. Then we need to find x, not x squared. So we are going to take square root for each side. Then we have x is equal to square root of negative 16. Or we can say x is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 16. Because in quadratic equations we have two solutions, one in positive and one in negative. Then we can simplify, as we studied before, negative 16 to, we can simplify it by the complex numbers. It will be negative 1 times 16. Or we can say x is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 1 times 16. Then x is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 1 times square root of 16. and we know that square root of 16 is equal to 4. Then x is equal to plus or minus 4, and we can replace square root of negative 1 by I, so it will be plus or minus 4i. So now we have the solutions for this equation. B. What are the solution? What are the solutions of each equation? 1, 5x squared plus 20 equal to 0. And if we have the equation of x squared plus 15 equal to 0, then how can we find the solution of each equation? For number 1, how can we find the solution of this equation? 5x squared plus 20 equal to 0. So we are going to isolate x squared by adding negative 20 to each side. Add negative 20 to each side, then we have 5x squared equal negative 20 equal to negative 20. Then by dividing each side by the coefficient of x squared, so it will give us x squared is equal to negative 4. X squared is equal to negative 4. We need to find x. How can we find x? Take the square root for each side. So it will be x is equal to plus or minus, don't forget, square root of negative 4. Then we can simplify by using the imaginary number I. So x will be plus or minus square root of negative 1 times 4. Then x is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 1, which is I, and square root of 4, which is 2. Then x is equal to plus or minus 2i, or we can say we have two solutions. Plus 2i, x is equal to plus 2i, and x is equal to negative 2i. We have two solutions, of course, because we have a quadratic equation. 2, if we have x squared plus 15 equals 0, how can we find the solution of this equation? So we are going to isolate x squared. So it will be x squared is equal to negative 15. Then take the square root for each side. Then we have x is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 15. So also we have two solutions. x is equal to plus or minus negative 1 times negative times the square root of 15. We can replace square root of negative 1 by I, so it will be plus or minus I square root of 15. And this is the final answer. Problem 7. What are the solutions of 2x squared minus 3x plus 5 equals 0? How can we find the solutions of this equation? We have a trinomial expression. So how can we solve this equation? It's a quadratic equation in the form of trinomial expression. So we are going to use quadratic formula by using quadratic formula. To find the x in the quadratic formula, we have studied before, x is equal to negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So we have to identify a and b and c. A, which is the leading coefficient, the coefficient of x squared, and b, which is the coefficient of x, and c, the constant. A, the leading coefficient, the coefficient of x squared, b, the coefficient of x, and c is the constant. A is equal to 2. B, with its sign, it will be negative 3. C, it will be plus 5. Then we can do the direct substitution. We are going to replace A by 2, B by negative 3, C by 5. Then finally we can easily solve the equation. So x is equal to negative b, negative 3, plus or minus square root of b squared, which is negative 3 all squared, minus 4a, which is 2, times c, which is 5, over 2 times 2. Negative times negative, positive 3, plus or minus square root of negative 3 squared, which is 9, minus 4 times 2, 8, times 5, 40, over 4. Then x is equal to 9 minus 40, it will be negative 31. So we have 3 plus or minus square root of negative 31. So we have to use the imaginary numbers, over 4. Then we can split this expression, so it will be 3x x is equal to 3 over 4 plus or minus, we have square root of 31 times square root of negative 1, which is I. So we have square root of 31 times I, don't forget, over 4. So finally we have two solutions. X1 is equal to 3 over 4 plus square root of 31 over 4I. X2 is equal to 3 over 4 minus square root of 31 over 4 times I. Let's see another example. B. What are the solutions of each equation? One, if we have 3x squared minus x plus 2 equals 0. How can we solve this equation? Again, we can use the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So first we have to identify a and b and c. A, the coefficient of x squared, which is 3. B, the coefficient of x, negative 1. C is the constant, which is 2. Then we can apply the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b, negative times negative 1 will be 1, plus or minus square root of b squared, negative 1 squared 1, minus 4 times a, which is 3, and c we can replace it by 2, over 2 times 3, 2 times a. Then x is equal to 1 plus or minus square root of 4 times 3, 12 times 2, 24. 1 minus 24, negative 23 over 6. Then easily we can find x, which is 1 plus or minus x is equal to 1 plus or minus square root of negative 1 times square root of 23 over 6. We can replace square root of negative 1 by I. So we have x is equal to 1 plus or minus square root of 23 times I over 6. So we have two solutions. We can say x1 is equal to 1 over 6 1 over 6 plus square root of 23i over 6, and x2 is equal to 1 over 6 minus square root of 23i over 6. These are the solutions of this equation. what are the solutions of 5x squared plus 2x plus 1 equal to 0. If we have 5x squared plus 2x plus 1 equal to 0, again we are going to use the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. First we can identify a and b and c. We need to identify a and b and c. A, the coefficient of x squared, which is 5. B, the coefficient of x, which is 2. C, the constant 1. Then we can apply the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b, negative 2, plus or minus square root of b squared 4 minus 4 times a, which is 5, times c, which is 1, over 2 times a, which is 5. Then x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus 4 times 5, 24 minus 20 over 10. And then we have negative 2 plus or minus square root of 4 minus 20 will be negative 16 over 10. Then easily we can find x. Negative 2 over 10 plus or minus, we have square root of negative 16, so it will be two parts, square root of negative 1, which is I, and square root of 16, which is 4. So we have 4i over 10. Then we have two solutions, and we can simplify 2 with 10. It will be 1 over 5. So x is equal to negative 1 over 5 plus or minus, and we can simplify 4 over 10. It will be 2 over 5. 2 over 5 times I. So x1 is equal to negative 1 over 5 plus 2 over 5i, and x2 is equal to negative 1 over 5 minus 2 over 5i. And this is the final answer. Finally, the complex numbers lesson is over, but we have an assignment 1. In the textbook, Algebra 2, page 253, starting from example number 8 till 44. I hope this video helped you. Thank you. Don't hesitate to contact me if you need any help. Thank you. See you tomorrow.